name is Jerry Gill. Today is September 3, 2010. I'm visiting with Bill Dragoo here on the OSU campus of Stillwater, Oklahoma. This interview is for the O State Storage Project and the Oakland World History Research Program. Bill, thanks. I know you got a lot going on and your business is really flourishing, and I appreciate you taking time out of your busy schedule to be with us.
You're welcome, Jerry. Glad to be here.
Well, we're going to talk about OSU. First of all, Bill, I want to back up and ask you a little bit. Can you tell me about where you grew up, a little bit about your family, your parents?
Well, I was one of those strange kids that was born and raised in Norman, and had an uncle who was the head of the math department and a cousin who was the head of the architectural department at OU, and grew up with OU. And I was crimson and cream all the way, and attended Norman High and all the public schools through that, and knew a girl in high school who had a friend who lived in Tulsa who was getting ready to attend OSU. And I started out at Oklahoma Christian, which was called Oklahoma Christian College outside of Edmond, the first summer semester right after I graduated from Norman High, and then the following semester. And this girl had asked me to come up and visit Oklahoma State. She was attending here and living in Drummond. And so I had never been to OSU. What was so funny about growing up in Norman, you never even thought about OSU. It wasn't even discussed. And that's what always kind of struck me as strange. You just knew about this obscure place that was up there somewhere on the prairie. And, and so I didn't even know where Stillwater actually really was. I just knew it was up 35. So I left Edmond and headed up here, and I came in, and I remember coming in and seeing right there where Theta Pond is, the Oklahoma State University. I thought, my gosh, look at this place. I said, this is phenomenal. This is a beautiful place. Because OU was somewhat fragmented. It was architectural design was all over the place. Every guy that had come in had his own architect build his own monument, in his style or the period styles, whatever. So there was no continuity in the architecture, and it was kind of spread out all over. And I began to see this architecture and everything, and how it all conformed. I thought, my goodness, this is a beautiful place. And so it was a little rambunctious in those days, to say the least. And it happened to be a Thursday night. And went over to Drummond, picked this girl up, and we went straight down to the Strip, down to Washington Street. And it looked like the Mardi Gras. And in those days, the police literally blocked off the streets so that no traffic could come up and down that street on a Thursday night. It was a little different back then than it was now. They were a little more permissive about things, a little more accepting, I guess. And I said, man, I found home. And everybody was unbelievably friendly. I'd never seen anything like it, because at OU, you hung in cliques. And I don't know how it is today, but back then, if you graduated Norman High, and even if you joined a fraternity or sorority, you tended to stay with the same little group, even within the organization. And everybody just seemed to stay in cliques even throughout. And up here, everybody was just out shaking hands. Hey, I'm so-and-so. And I remember I didn't have anywhere to stay, and I didn't want to really drive back. It was getting late. And I'd met a kid on the Strip, and he lived on the Strip in a little house, what was kind of a little house back behind one of the buildings there next to where the Coachman was, which is now, I think they call it the College Bar. And he said, but just stay with me. I didn't know him from Adam. Turned out to be a great guy. I said, holy cow, what is this all about? I've never seen anything like it. And I had a friend that was going to OU, and he was from Muskogee. And he said, oh man, OSU is a great place. So we transferred up the very next semester to OSU, and that's how I got here, and lived in Kerr Hall, and then ended up joining Lambda Chi fraternity, and then the rest is history. It was a pretty wild and crazy time, I'll tell you.
Let me back up and ask you, did you have any brothers or sisters?
I had one sister. She attended OU. She was 6 years older.
Okay. And what did your dad do?
He was civil service at Tinker Air Force Base. He had been in World War II and in the Army Air Corps and B-17s, and then After that, he and two other people formed the Oklahoma Air National Guard, and then from there he went on to Tinker, where he was a B-52 specialist.
Now, Norman just had one high school at the time,
Right.
the Tigers, so you, were you involved in any school activities in high school?
Yeah, well, I wasn't so much in high school as much as in junior high. I was president of the student council. When I got to high school, I wasn't really involved in. I mean, played basketball and track and cross country, things of that nature. But I wasn't really involved in the student affairs. So it was a pretty neat deal because we were orange and black, and I didn't have to change any clothing.
That's good.
Yeah.
You talked about your first experience coming up. What were some of your impressions of the camp? You talking about the landscaping, the architectural style. What do you remember about the campus? What were some of your first impressions?
Well, the first impression was the student union. I'd never seen anything like it. I was very familiar with the OU student union, and this was just this monstrosity. And then the library right across from it, in that mall, that library mall, was just was unbelievable. And then, like I say, the architecture, I didn't realize at the time how it conformed, but one thing I really liked was that I could get to class walking just about anywhere because it was so centralized. Whereas OU was very decentralized. You literally had to have some transportation to get around that place.
You said that first year you lived in Kerr Hall.
Uh-huh.
Mm-hmm. What was your major, Bill?
I started out in political science, and then I ended up in radio, TV, film. In the radio side of it, I was going to be in the sales, in broadcast sales, and but that never worked out.
Well, you mentioned the strip and some things. At that time, what were some of the favorite student hangouts?
The Coachman and the Wet Olive were the two big hangouts down on the strip. Later in time, the place called the Jail, which is now Dirty's, and that was a very popular place. But the strip was pretty much just a place to go and congregate. And then the Whaler came along up there, and there was I think it was called the Slopes, which also was owned by Jim and Joe Hodges that owned the Coachman, and it was just it was quite a place. There was one, I can't ever remember the name of it down there, but it was a guy named Goose owned it, and it was just a little bar. And he was quite a character. He was a local bookmaker, and so you go in there if you want to place your bets, and he served peanuts. There were peanut hulls all over the floor. And the popular drink at that time was a red beer, tomato juice and beer. And so we'd go into Goose's place and drink red beer. And he also owned, I think it was called the Anchor, which is now
Knobloch.
Yeah, down on Knobloch. I forget the name of it now, but next to Joe's there. So it was a pretty wild and crazy place. You could get the best of all worlds here.
Well, speaking of Bill of wild and crazy, there's a student event in the mid-'70s, and for a few years, remembered by many as Streakers Night.
Correct.
Now, this invokes a lot of positive memories and some not so positive memories, particularly with school administration.
Yeah. Oh, yeah, I had an encounter with the administrator that night.
But understand that you observed and personally participated
yes,
in Streaker Night events. Not as a streaker, just get that out right now.
No, I was not a streaker.
But I want to kind of ask you, do you recall, so what, the Bill year, so the year you enrolled at Oklahoma State was, that fall, what year?
That would have been, I guess I came in 71 or, gosh, let's see. I guess it'd been about right, yeah.
Was it going on when your first year as a student?
No, I think, you mean the streaker stuff?
Streakers Night?
No, I think that was 73.
73.
If I'm not mistaken. We were trying to remember last night. I was talking to Debbie Bear and Lon Bear's wife up in Ponca. She said, I'm pretty sure it was 73.
Okay. Well, was streaking a national phenomenon at that time, wasn't it?
Yeah.
Kind of across the country.
Yeah, you remember that one guy had that song, the streaker. I can't remember his name. He was always did kind of some funny little songs. And yeah, it was a big deal right then, how to keep people to streak across the baseball fields and stuff. So it was a phenomenon, yeah.
Finally caught on in Oklahoma.
Yeah, I don't know.
We're always a little bit behind the curve, but that's okay.
I don't know how it caught on, but it was kind of strange how it occurred.
Well, I say, so where did Streakers Night, where did it occur? Where physically, where is it?
It was on Washington Street, on what we call the Strip, 3 blocks.
University down to 6th,
right.
down the Strip, okay.
Right.
And what time of the year When did it occur?
I believe it was spring. You know, it's kind of fuzzy. I can't remember, but I'm pretty sure it was in the spring. If I'm not
Was it
mistaken.
on Thursday night before the beginning of spring break? Do you recall?
It might have been. I'm fuzzy on the dates.
I talked to one of the individuals, said they remember it being on that. But spring break started on, well, officially on Saturday, but everybody left out on Friday, so it was Thursday night.
Yeah, I think it probably was. It would have been about then, yeah. Because I know it was in the spring for sure.
Well, how many people would participate in this event? Were they primarily OSU students? Or were some out-of-town people too?
No, it was all students that I recall, and I don't remember what had happened was what some of my fraternity brothers and I had a farmhouse guy and another fraternity brother, and we had been in West Texas buying a horse for some reason. I have no idea. We were always doing something that was off the wall, and for some reason one of them bought a horse. And we came back into town, I don't know what time it was, 7:30, 8 o'clock at night, and we were coming back up from 6th Street, back up up Washington, to turn back into the Lambda Chi House. We were kind of wanting to see what was going on Thursday night, you know, and so we come up through there, and it was just packed, and we were kind of really having to drive slow, hauling this trailer with a horse in it, you know, up there, and I couldn't really tell what was going on. All right, I mean, we were just hollering and waving at we saw people we knew, you know, and we thought it was strange enough to be driving down the street with a horse, you know. So we ran up and parked it up the Lambda Chi, which is just right off the strip there, and we ran back down there because it looked like there was a lot going on. And I got down there and realized there were some guys on top of the buildings that were nude. You know, they were naked up there on, you know, straddling these signs, and it was mostly guys. I don't remember any girls streaking. Now, there might have been, but it was guys, and as I remember, they were all, you know, on, let me check this, because Larry Shell there, he wasn't a participant, by the way, but he is our president of the Alumni Association, and, but we got involved in it pretty quickly, as far as getting down there and getting amongst them, I should say. And it was quite fun. And then I overheard some young boys talking about, let's go down to the Sirloin Stockade.
Well, let me back up. I want to get to that story.
Okay.
Because that's sort of another tradition. I want to ask you, you're talking about the students. I think at that time in Oklahoma, the legal age for drinking 3.2 beer was actually 18, wasn't it? So students,
it was.
It was legal. It was
now there was a time when it was 21, but the Stillwater Police Department turned their head on that deal and said as long as a kid had a college ID and stayed within the confines of that area, that they were okay with that. And because I had a friend who was a police officer here, and their logic behind that was that the kids, if they could walk somewhere, they'd keep them off the streets of Stillwater. And so that was prevalent for some time, that if you had a student ID, you could drink. But I think the legal age was 21. For a while, it was 18. That's a whole nother story, how I got with the local Coors distributor here and was selected to be I don't know, the liaison, whatever you're going to call it, to try to get majority rights and get that back down to 18.
Well, let's come back. I want to get that. Okay, so don't even forget that, Bill. Well, the other thing was they didn't have an open container all the time. You could actually have you could be, so when you're talking about people being on the street or on the sidewalk in the strip, it was legal.
Right. They carried drinking right outside the bars. Nobody thought anything about it. Everything was just in paper cup.
Just in your mind, you come with the guys and women. Can you just sort of paint the picture of what, as you look down Washington Street, you know, the strip, what it looked like? It
was packed. It looked like the Mardi Gras. Absolutely. And
wall to wall.
Yeah, and periodically one guy would come running down through there naked. Okay, you know, but most of them were on top of the buildings. You know, they'd climbed up there somehow, got on top of the buildings, but every once in a while you'd see another guy shooting down through there. You know.
Well, it sort of reminds me of when I asked you the question. Some people that I talked to said, well, at times they'd be in groups. There might be, you know, 2 or 3 or 4. Sometimes there might be one person, but they'd go how would they like come off a side street and go for about a block?
They just come out of nowhere. I don't know where they come from. You know, you just see them all of a sudden they just shoot by you.
You run down the street.
I never saw anybody stand still very long.
But now, I didn't realize, so some of them were nude up on top of the buildings.
Yeah, yeah. There sure were, yeah. In fact, if I'm not mistaken, I think the yearbook actually of that time shows that.
And so, as you said earlier, you never seen any female streakers.
No, I don't remember seeing any female streakers. There might have been some, but I certainly didn't see any. I would have remembered that.
So I kind of trying to summarize what you said, but they'd kind of come out of nowhere, just out of a side alley, a door somewhere.
Yeah, it wouldn't be somebody that just strip naked there and then start running. Yeah. You know, it'd just be somebody just come out of nowhere.
Shoot down, but what about a block or two and then disappear somewhere?
Yeah.
Well, what was the crowd reaction when the streakers?
Oh, you know, it was just everybody was, you know, all behind it. You know, it was just so bizarre.
Hoots and cheers.
Yeah, absolutely. You know, that was kind of a strange period in American history. You know, that was all during the Vietnam stuff and all that. And there was a lot of, you know, student rebellion. We didn't have much of it here, you know, at OSU. That, you know, a lot of organized SDS stuff and all that. But, you know, it was kind of a different time when it was kind of a free spirit time.
So you had people packed in the bars. You had them out on the sidewalks, in the street, and so you just.
Well, most everybody was out of the bars.
Out
you know,
street.
Yeah, on the street.
Like, so 2,000 or 3,000 or more,
Gosh,
several thousand students.
I just remember it being packed. So there must have been easily.
Yeah, because you're talking 4 blocks. Is that basically what you're talking about 4 blocks of the strip?
Yeah.
So just the whole street for 4 blocks down.
Yeah, most of it was from, you know, was the first, you know, the half from down to where Bill's Italian Pizza was down there on the corner. Most of it was down into that area, and it confined to that 1 block area.
About a couple blocks there just south of the campus.
Yeah.
Well, now, let's get back to your story, Bill. I want to ask you, but another tradition, in addition to streaking on Streakers Night, was taking the sirloin corral bull and throwing it in Theta Pond.
Right.
But let's back up and say, what was the sirloin corral bull? I mean, can you tell me a little bit
about
that?
Well, Sirloin Corral was one of these buffet-style places that is very much like Golden Corral now, I guess you could say. And, you know, you can go in there and get some little cheap steak, you know, and baked potato and whatever. And they had this big bull out in front that was on wheels. It was on a built-in trailer, you know, so they could move it around and hitch it up to a pickup or whatever and move it around from location to location. And it sat out in front of there. That was on the south end of Washington there, back on the west side, almost to 6th Street. And so there was some discussion about, I have no idea about, let's go get the bull and parade it up the street. And that was really going to be the only intentions, was just to get the bull and, you know, and get a hold of it and literally hand pull it down the street. I don't think there was ever any more agenda than that.
Well, how big was the bull?
It was sizable. I would say that, I was trying to remember how tall that thing would be, but it was probably, I would say, anywhere between probably 10 feet high, 12 feet high, and it was, you know, 10, 12 feet long. It was good size, let me assure you. It was.
So how does this all happen? Does it just happen, or is this planned?
No, it was sporadic. Yeah, there was no forethought into it. It just like, we ought to go get the bull. Okay, let's go. So we went down there and got that, and I was always kind of one that could talk people into things, you know. And so I didn't pull the bull, you know. I would just spectate, you know, and egging them on. Get the bull down the street, boy, you know, and egging them on.
Bill, let me back up and ask you. So how did you? So I mean, who was the group that come up with the idea? And
I didn't know them.
How did you get involved with it?
I didn't know them. I didn't know who they were.
You're just down on the strip there.
Yeah, and just
a group of guys.
And it was very spontaneous. It just happened. There was no real planning. It was very spontaneous, you know. And so when this discussion started, we all ran down there, and got the bull, and a bunch of them got it, and one old kid got up on it, and he was on the bull, up on the head of the bull, waving at the crowd. Now I don't know if this is true or not, but when we got down around where the light was, there was a traffic light that hung in the middle of the street, and it was just one single light. And I don't think the bull was tall enough for this, but the kid either fell off or got knocked off by the traffic light. And I don't know quite which one it was, but I don't think the bull was tall enough to get knocked off. But we like to tell that story, that he got knocked off.
Now you're directing this, so kind of give me what you're doing.
Yeah, well, everything was going to end. When we got down to the end of the street, it just kind of was it just kind of came about. Let's just keep going with it, And so
we see in the street you're there where the strip, Washington Street, tees into University Avenue.
Exactly.
Okay.
Yeah. And so we just turned left. Well, when I saw all this happening, I ran up to the Lambda Chi house, which was directly across the street on the south side of Theta Pond there on University. And I had a fraternity brother that had a room right in the front, and he had these loud speakers, that were stereo speakers that he had in his front window. And at that time, the Led Zeppelin was real big, and Stairway to Heaven was the big song, and he'd blast that all over campus during the day, the whole album through these big speakers. You could be walking around campus and hear that album going off, and you could hook a microphone up to it. Okay, so I ran up there and I said, "Help me!" I said, "Look at this big crowd out here." He was in the house. He was unaware of all of it.
I said, "What's his name, Bill?"
His name was David Helmy.
Can you spell it, David?
Helmey.
Okay.
And he was my big brother in fraternity. And so anyway, we hooked up. I said, "Hook up that microphone." And so we had those speakers blaring out there. And so had gotten down that far, and the crowd was huge down there. And I got on there and I said, "People, this is your leader. Throw the graven image into the pond." And I was going on and on and on with this, and this was going on, and all of a sudden, I feel this hand touch me and say, "Dragoo, put the microphone down." And it was the Dean of Men, and I don't remember what his name was, but he'd come into the room, and he said, "You're inciting a riot."
So what are you thinking when you're just Dean of Men?
Well, I mean, you look around
on your shoulder, and
you look around and you think, I didn't even know who he was. Okay, I'd never seen him before. I'd look around, I find out, this is the Dean of Men.
What are you thinking? What's going through your mind now?
Oh gosh, I can't even remember. But I imagine I panicked. I know I put the microphone down. But I never had any repercussions from it. I didn't have to show up in his office or anything. That was just the end of it. I think he had more. I think after that night he had a lot to deal with, and I was just wasn't all that.
So where was the bull at this time? They thrown the bull in the
pond? They had followed instructions and actually thrown it in. They just literally rolled it where it went in head first.
Was it your suggestion then to put it in the pond?
That was what I told them. Yeah, I had said this. I was saying, "This is your leader, people. This is your leader. Throw the graven image into the pond." And there was a lot more to it than that. I kept them going. So
great.
Yeah.
So the pond now. At that time, you could. If people understand the curve was a little bit different, then you actually could take the bull and really just let it run off the edge of the pond and put it in. You wouldn't be able to now because they've redesigned it. But okay, so just head first.
Head first.
So what happens when it hits? What is it? Flows? It sinks? What happens?
I don't remember it all getting in there. As I remember, only about half of it was in there, but they might have finally got it all in there. I don't know how they ever got it out. But.
So did the crowd, as they see what's happening,
they're cheering and
they're
raising Cane.
Then they turn on the University Avenue with you.
So the crowd followed the whole thing.
How many people were in that crowd?
Oh my gosh, that whole street was packed.
Oh, God.
You know, or our fraternity house, the front yard was packed. Everybody was really watching this thing, you know, because it was
So, Bill, what year was this for you in school? Was this your
junior year.
Junior year?
Uh-huh.
This would have been in 70,
I think it's 73.
73.
Yeah.
So now, was that the first year? Because it became a tradition. That was the first year that
That was it. It was all spontaneous. It was not anything that was ever planned to my knowledge. Now, I'm sure that whoever came up with it, I don't know if it was some kid just decided to do it when he was drunk, or if it was, you know, a planned thing by a group of guys, you know.
And so your stories, you just happened to be there beside when they
Yeah.
started talking about it?
Yeah, I'm just driving up the street with a horse. You know, I've been in West Texas skipping school all week.
Lord. Well, Bill, help me understand that. So this was the first year. This was all spontaneous, in terms of the streaking, about the being down the strip, everybody it was like a warm spring night.
Yeah.
The Thursday night before spring break, and so everybody's out drinking, so just crowd. It's nothing planned about this whole event.
No, not to my knowledge.
The streaking, anything, just.
Yeah, it was very spontaneous to my knowledge, you know, and back then Thursday nights was the night. It was always, you know, quite eventful down there, regardless of whether there were streakers or not. So.
How many streakers did you see personally that night, Bill?
I don't know. Gosh, I don't know. Maybe 10 or 12. You know, different ones. You know, just periodically somebody shoot through. You see 2 or 3 guys. You know, so there might have been 20 for all I know.
Yeah, they're like are they totally naked? Or they got their shoes on, or they?
Yeah, I remember. I'm pretty sure all of them had shoes on, but some of them probably didn't. You know, I wasn't looking at their feet. You know, we were just, you know, it'd just be kind of a blur.
That's great. Do you know? So, then the next year, did you participate in it next year, your senior year?
You know, I don't remember, Jerry. That what transpired that next year on Streaker's Night. All I remember is this one. I don't remember the next year, you know.
Streaker's Night went on for 3 or 4 years, I think, did it not?
It went on for years, because when I moved to Houston, I remember hearing it on like CNN or NBC News. You know, one of these, it was actually on national news one night when I was watching the news program, you know, so it went into the 80s.
So you're directly responsible for starting the.
Well, I don't know if I was directly responsible, but I was instrumental in it. Let's put this way.
Helping start the tradition of throwing the stockade bull into the pond. Though.
Yeah, exactly.
What do you think about that? Looking back in hindsight, Bill, you think, well.
It was just another day, Jerry. We had many days like that. You know.
We won't pursue that anymore.
No.
Well, let's come back to this. So you said trying to get the legal drinking age lowered from 21 to 18.
Right.
You said you were involved in that. Can you share that
It
story?
had been 18, and we'd just gotten a new Coors distributor at Stillwater. That was out on 6th Street, and I don't remember how this all happened, but they had talked me into being their representative and give me all these little index cards that were. I would go into the student union, set up a little table, and you'd fill this out, this card saying that, you know, we demand our majority rights. If we're old enough to go to Vietnam, we're old enough to drink. And then I'd take that big group and I'd send them off to the state capitol. And for that, they'd pay us in cases of beer and in kegs. And so, in fact, that year, that was about 72, I believe. That year at the homecoming parade, I was a giant Coors can.
How do you get into this idea? They made it for you?
They had a big thing that was actually a display. That was a big Coors can that stood up probably about 4 feet, and we rigged arm straps in it, put little holes in the front of that can where I could see out of it, and then I walked the whole route as a Coors can.
Now that's about a 2-mile route.
Yeah, it was. We started downtown, went all the way.
Pretty hot and sweaty under there.
I don't remember. When you're a kid, you don't think about stuff like that, you know.
So what possessed you to do that? Did they ask you if you do that?
No, that was my idea.
Oh, okay.
Yeah. Yeah.
So you're
They were certainly behind it.
Oh, so you're waving at the crowd and walking down.
Yeah, and I had cut holes from ours to get out the little can, you know.
Was your efforts rewarded?
No, we never overturned it. So.
I guess it's rewarded. You got your cases of beer, right?
Oh yeah, absolutely. Yeah.
You're pretty popular in the fraternity.
Yeah,
lots of
very
friends.
popular. Yeah.
Oh gosh. Do you have any idea? So Strickers and I went after you graduated. Went on for a few years after that.
It went on for, I'd say, over a decade. I mean, because I remember hearing about it in Houston, like I say, on some type of national news. It might have gone into the late 80s, in fact, before it.
What? Do you have any other favorite memories of Strickers Night that you recall?
No, it's hard to recall a whole lot of it. I was amongst them not only in, I was amongst them in spirit, too. There were a lot of spirits.
All right. Well, Bill, what, other than, of course, activities we talked about, were you involved in your fraternity? Again, you were engaged, I guess, active in your fraternity. Were there other organizations or activities you were involved in?
Well, I was actively involved in fraternity. I was Russ chairman and held some other offices, but I actually ran for student senate, or was getting ready to run, and then realized that was probably more than I could handle, with some of the loads I had, and it was just too much responsibility.
So what were some of your other than...
So Trojan and this other girl ended up, David Trojan, they ended up with it. So I remember Trojan was so nervous because he thought he knew this guy that we were going to run for president and vice president would beat him and this girl because of popularity. And so they kind of talked us out of running, and they ended up getting elected.
What are some other favorite memories of your undergraduate experience, Bill? Your times on the OSU campus that stand out in your mind?
Well, there are just so many, I mean, a lot of them we don't want to go into. I'll assure you. But it was pretty fun, I'll tell you. It really was. I guess I'd have to say that from a social standpoint, those Thursday nights. Now, the Gray Fox, which is a bookstore now across from Joe's, that was Wednesday nights. They had picked up their own night, and that was quite a place because it was two-story drinking, and this was a wild place in those days. I don't know that I ever saw this, but Playboy magazine had this as one of the top 10 partying schools in the United States. They would rate party schools, and OSU was always ranked in there. So. So what year did you graduate, Bill? 74.
74, okay. Can you kind of share briefly your professional career after you graduated?
Yeah, I'd gone to Tulsa, got married, gone to Tulsa, and was pursuing a career there and found nothing but a waiter's job. And I was waiting tables, and a gentleman I was waiting tables with. He thought I was pretty sharp, I guess, and he had a company that was involved in what they call process controls, which were it basically was electrical engineering of all things, instrument and electrical engineering, and wanted me to go to Houston, transfer to Houston. He had a division down there to sell what's called process instrumentation or control systems for refineries and petrochemical plants. So I went from radio TV major directly into electrical engineering, and stayed in that for 15 years. Was very successful in that, in selling flow systems, control systems, pressure systems for these big petrochemical plants that are all along the Gulf Coast. And I kind of started to get kind of burned out on that. I figured I had inhaled so many carcinogens down there that I probably wasn't long for the world if I didn't get out of there. And had run into a friend who was in the medical industry, and he got me an interview with Olympus, which was the camera people, but they also have a medical instruments division, and I went to work for them in their optical division, which was microscopes and image analysis systems for medical research and for clinical and reference laboratories. And that was very interesting. I had gotten involved in that career. I got involved in some things that only people dream about being around. I was had gotten involved through Baylor College of Medicine in Houston with Dr. Thomas Caskey, who was one of the three researchers who did the genome mapping of the body. And we got involved in that. That was extremely interesting. I got involved in University of Houston with the professor there that did the first successful superconductivity experiments, and trained a NASA shuttle crew one time on a Saturday. They were going on a mission, and trained them how to use some instruments one day for their astronauts to utilize some of our equipment in the space shuttle. And
what kind of instruments could you describe?
Those were actually some microscopes that they were going to use up there. And I went through and showed them, kind of how to set that thing up there for maximum resolution, and it was going to go, part of their experiments that they were going to be conducting. And I was in with a lady at University of Texas dental branch there she was wanting to see how cartilage grew in a vacuum in outer space, and that was part of her experiment, and they had to use a microscope up there for part of this. And so I had four of their payload specialists.
Do you remember the names of any of the astronauts?
I don't remember. And probably they weren't the guys that were flying. They were the I guess they call them payload specialists, and got involved with NASA they were having trouble with the tiles on those. If you remember, they'd have them falling off, and they were wanting to measure the temperatures of those tiles, and they brought me in, and the problem was there were no thermocouples, which are a temperature measuring device that could take the heat that they needed to subject those to. They could measure that high, and so we developed. You had to have dissimilar metals in these thermocouples, and we developed one out of rhodium and iridium. That were the two dissimilar metals that were enough to take the high temperatures to be able to, subject this thing to the test. So I got involved in unbelievable things like that constantly by just selling these products, and worked with Texas Instruments on development of semiconductors, and every day it was the most interesting job I had ever had, because it was so interesting, and everything and so much stuff that you did was such groundbreaking research and technology that there was never a dull day. It was just constantly something, that was just, right on the cutting edge of technology. And so I felt it was very privileged to have been a part of that, and I've spent 10 years there.
You ever wonder about how did broadcast journalism major? So obviously I'm going to throw you a compliment. You must have been pretty quick in the uptake to figure these things out. It's a whole different scientific field for you.
Totally. They were both totally scientific.
Did you have to do a lot of study and research?
No, I just caught on naturally to all of it. I don't know. My father was not an engineer, but he had an engineering mind, and he basically was an engineer with the Air Force. And I guess I just picked up that mentality, and my uncle had been the head of the math department at OU. My cousin was the head of the architectural department, so I guess I got some of those genes. I don't know, and it just came natural. All of it just seemed to come natural. But all of it was always so interesting to me that I'm ADD, and some might say ADHD sometimes, but it for me to really get into something, it has to be interesting for me to be able to focus in on it. And so anyway, through that, I went to work for another company that was called Owen Healthcare, and
what was the name?
Owen Healthcare in Houston, okay. And they owned about 400 hospital pharmacies nationwide, and I was in what was called the Metatrol division. What we did was we had dispensing units that we had developed that dispense all your medications on the floors of hospitals. We had a competitor called Pyxis out of California that was owned by Cardinal Health, And they had the majority of the market share, but we had developed something that was very unique, and we were starting to enter the market with that. And Cardinal decided to come in and buy us out. And what they were really wanting was the 400 pharmacies, because I just gave them much more of a customer base. But they also inherited the Metatrol division, and they gave us a severance package for a year. And I'd only been there a year. I mean, what a windfall. And I said, if you're ever going to do it, you need to do it now. And I started off deciding to go into business for ourselves. I was going to just get several lines of medical equipment and become an independent medical sales rep selling diagnostic equipment. And I started picking up a few lines here and there. And I picked up one line I picked up was a hematology analyzer, a blood analyzer for blood counts. Mm-hmm. And they also had contracted with a company that made these little assays that were drug tests that you just dipped in urine, and it would tell what drug that someone was on. Mm-hmm. And they were 99.9% accurate, and they were only FDA approved for professional use. In other words, in a clinic or in a doctor hospital setting. So you couldn't sell them directly to the public. And I got a hold of that, got a hold of the guy who developed the assay out of Redwood City, California, went out there and met with him, and we began to manufacture those ourselves. And I went through the process with FDA to get what's called a 510K, which is FDA approval for over-the-counter. And we were the first to get over-the-counter approval for those drug tests. And my first customer was Randall's supermarkets in Houston, who had pharmacies within their supermarkets. And then I windfalled real well on that because Safeway came and bought out Randall's, which had 135 stores. And their pharmacy buyer just incorporated it throughout all the Safeways nationwide. And then we ended up getting into about 400 or 500 Walmarts. And so it just took off. And we packaged it. It was a beautiful package. It's called the Peace of Mind Home Drug Test. And then I sold that off to a group out of Boise, Idaho. And then they in turn sold it to a bigger company. And now there's really only about one test on the market. It's all kind of consolidated.
So with that number, I figured that there must have been a pretty significant financial milestone in your life when you sold off the company.
It was very interesting, to get the first over-the-counter approval for that. And now it's a very standard product on the market. You can find it in Stillwater. I was in the pharmacy yesterday, and basically there was the same product sitting right there on the shelf.
So you're, at this point in your life, you're financially independent?
Well, somewhat, but I had decided to reinvest almost everything back into a company that I had that time was called Southwest Diagnostics, and we were doing neurological diagnostics. I'd for things like carpal tunnel, the detection of what's called radiculopathy, which is radiating pain that's generated from the spine, and I'd come up with an idea that these family practice and primary care physicians, internal medicine, orthopedic surgeons, pain management, that they were referring all their patients out to specialists like neurologists to do this test. And one of the biggest problems they had was when a primary care doctor referred to a specialist, a lot of times they lost their patients. And they were just aggravated about that because a cardiologist, neurologist, whatever the specialist was, would try to grab and capture that patient and not return them back to the primary care, so he would lose that revenue. So by going into the office of a primary care doctor and offering these tests in office, it provided value. It was a value-added service for him because it became a one-stop shop for diagnostics. So he kind of had a leg up on his competitive family practice doctors in the area because he could provide all this testing that was convenient and in a familiar environment, for his patients. And we began to go into then cardiovascular diagnostics and autonomic neuropathy and set up just a whole mobile diagnostic system to go into these offices. And the doctors, we were able to legally be able to reimburse them so that they were actually making money off of this service as well as retaining their patients. So it was a win-win, and started that in Houston and moved it all over Texas with that. And that's how I ended up getting into the diabetes business, was through study of neurology, began to notice that there was a lot of lower neuropathy that was being tested, on the lower extremities, that by these primary care docs. And I went and talked to one. I said, "What's all this lower testing that you're doing?" He says, "Half my patients are diabetics." And I said, "Gee whiz, you got to be kidding." And so I began to research and found out that 80% of all diabetics were treated by basically family practice, because there were just so many of them. There's currently 37% of the Texas population is diabetic. I would hate to say what the percentage is of Oklahoma. But by that, I began to realize and talk to diabetics that there was no continuity of care for diabetes anywhere worldwide, that it was very fragmented, that in order for a diabetic to get effective treatment, he had to go to multitude of sources for the diagnostics, for specialties, and they became very frustrated. And that's really the reason there's no compliance in diabetes, is because there's no continuity of care. You can't go somewhere and get the care all in one place. And a lot of the elderly, they just give up. I don't have time to be running around, and they just kind of throw in the towel. And I decided, let's look at building a comprehensive continuity of care system. And I came up, worked with, talked to Burns Hargis here, and then he put me in touch with the OSU Medical School in Tulsa, and we began to create a continuity of care, comprehensive centers that we call DiaCare centers. We're putting the first one in. It opens October the 15th in Cleveland, Oklahoma, of all places. And you would think that would be strange, but their demographics are perfect for it. We joint ventured with the Cleveland area hospital there, and Cleveland, Oklahoma is going to be the, I don't know how anywhere to put it, the only place in the world that has continuity of care for diabetes. And we have some very cutting edge technology that can actually stop and reverse diabetes, and we're the only company in the world that can effectively provide this technology. So,
what an interesting, fascinating career.
Maybe that came from just an old OSU party boy, which is amazing. All my old Lambda Chi buddies, we were always, the only thing that ever saved us was Acacia fraternity from being last in grade point average. And every one of us guys, we all will meet up here tomorrow, which is, we're playing Washington State, first game. We'll all meet up on our tailgate over there, and every one of those guys is highly successful. It is, and so.
What are some examples? What are, if they use
well, Lon Bear is a dentist up in Ponca City, been very successful in dentistry the last 35 years. We've got, gosh, I'm just trying to think of all the guys that come. The Allert brothers will be there, and one of them owns a big company out of Tulsa that is into what I started out in, which process instrumentation to petrochemical industries, and and his brother is a scratch golfer and very successful. Just I am amazed. And so, like Jim Hess of the OSU Med School said, all those buildings on the OSU campus where you see those names are C students, and I believe that, so.
Bill, kind of turned a different direction a little bit. You remain closely connected to Oklahoma State University and to the Alumni Association. You've been a leader in the association. You're an officer, and certainly in Houston, was president of the Houston chapter.
Right.
And we're active, I think, for a while in the Dallas chapter as well.
Still are.
Still are, and served on the National Board of Directors for several years with the Alumni Association.
Back on it again.
You're right. And from your perspective, how important is a strong alumni association at Oklahoma State University?
It's very important. It is the most important segment of this university after you graduate. And I was always just a little bit aggravated that we were treated somewhat as a stepchild sometimes, when in reality the Alumni Association is that connection between the student after they come out and after they graduate and coming back in to be a part of the university. And so many times I think that it's been other departments or other bureaucracies in here that it's almost been like the tail wagging the dog. The Alumni Association was supposed to be responsible for keeping this connection so that, not only would they have that connection of the loyalty but also for financial support in donations and so much of the time it's been where I'd have to say the foundation has run, and I've got a little bit of a burr under my saddle about this, has run the show too many times, and we felt like a stepchild, especially back in the when I was a board member, 15 years ago, and at that time we had a great president by the name of Jerry Gill, who had the foresight to say, let's be self-funding, let's endow ourselves. And for that, I think that he was probably one of the most monumental figures in this university as far as I'm concerned, because he had the foresight to say, okay, if we're not going to get the support that we need, let's self-support. I'll never forget, I think the first $150,000 was Bill Harrison. And I was so impressed when he came up with that. And at that time, I wasn't really in a financial position to put money into it, but I am now. And I do give directly to the Alumni Association because I know how important it is as far as the connections and getting involvement back from the graduates.
Bill, in your opinion, what Alumni Association programs and services have been most successful and effective during your leadership tenure?
Of course, the chapters have been the most effective. The Houston chapter where I was president was when Jane McKinney, I took over from her back there. She was a very outstanding president. We had some really good presidents down there, and have had. It was floundering just a little bit, and I took my marketing skills and decided, okay, let's put those in place down here. And we built a very nice chapter down there, a very big chapter. We had extremely heavy involvement. We even endowed a local scholarship at that time to be able to give a student, so much money a year. And we were able to build that up from just a handful to where we'd have meetings with several hundred, and to the point where the deans actually would even come in. And that was where the connections really are. All politics is local. And so the chapter program, and while I was before I joined the board, Jerry Gill had come up with this program of bringing in all the chapter presidents for a conference. And that was huge. Then you were connected back to the university, and there was a comprehensive program that all of us carried out. Then we were all on the same page. So that was huge. That was the one biggest thing that helped me promote Houston into the organization that it was.
To continue to be effective, what areas will the Alumni Association need to focus on going forward, do you think?
Really, it is about this connection, staying connected and getting a little bit more power, as far as being able to contact these people, more in the fundraising side of it, not have their hands tied as much in the fundraising side. But that's really not, I think, our primary goal, but it would certainly be a help to the university if their hands weren't tied quite so hard. But it really is the pursuit of bringing out and finding these students and finding, common interest that will bring them back into the university, and back onto the campus. And if they're not able to come back to campus, whatever support they can give.
Bill, what are some of your favorite memories at the Alumni Association? Because I know you've been for many years. You've been strongly engaged. You have some favorite memories, events, times, activities?
Oh, some of my most favorite memories were at the board meetings. Okay, I mean, we had quite a group back then, and I am at a loss. what was the congressman's name that was
Wes.
Wes Watkins. Oh, I used to, we sat alphabetically, and he sat up in the corner up there, and somebody would be giving a speech, and he would come up with some of the most hilarious little quips, and I would just be falling out. And Dr. Robert Comm, who was past president, sat behind me, and he was just a great man. I didn't know him when I was here, but I got to know him, and he was a stand-up guy, and I'll never forget, I'd given a speech on my committee up there, and he reached over back behind, and he goes, and he had this guy little voice. He said, "Bill," he said, "I am so proud that young men like you were here during my 10 years president." I thought, Dr. Comm, you just didn't know me.
He wasn't there to put his hand on your shoulder.
Yeah.
Was it?
When all my friends found out I was on the board, they said, "They just don't know you, do they?"
Bill, how do you feel about the future of Oklahoma State University? Is it moving in the right direction?
It's absolutely moving in the right direction.
What do you like about it?
Our student count's up. I see that. I like the regents that are currently on. Calvin Anthony's a good friend. I like Calvin. I like his view of the way things should be, and he's just a good, solid guy. I like the program that Burns Hargis has come up with, as far as trying to raise, kind of endow ourselves here. I think we're moving in a really good direction. I like the way that that the university is beginning to get real recognition within the state and in the nation. We're a stepchild for so much of the time. I don't feel like we are anymore. I no longer see that. But I don't see us going anywhere but up. I'm seeing great programs. I live in Texas. See great programs in Texas. I know that one of our alums recently gave $10 million for West Texas students to come, and that would be something that would take care of their out-of-state tuition fees, and it's things like that. I'm beginning to see us really outreach into other areas. We've become very popular. OSU has become extremely popular in North Texas, and there's significant percentages out of the South Lake area, Grapevine area, McKinney area where I live, that are going to OSU. I'm always surprised if I have Oklahoma State shirt on, how many if I go to anywhere within the community, I'll hear 2 or 3 people say their son or daughter is currently at OSU.
Right.
I see as many Texas tags now in Stillwater as I do Oklahoma tags, I think.
Well, from your perspective as a lifelong, active alumnus, what should OSU retain and continue as it moves forward? What are those qualities? What are those things it does well that it needs to continue to do?
It is that caring attitude, that non-egotistical attitude that just carries on, that high character. We've got character. There's no question. We've got integrity, and we stand by those principles. And when in the face of when it does us no good or appears to not being doing us any harm, short-term harm, but we maintain our integrity and character always.
What ways do you think universities will need to evolve and to change in the future, continue to be the cutting edge?
Well, I'm not sure from an academic standpoint. I'm not that involved in it academically. I think we've got some solid programs here as far as, but I think that we do need to focus more back on, and I think Burns Hargis is back on the business college, and just make sure their academics are up to extremely high standards. That's what we're really all about. There's a lot of extracurricular stuff that goes on, and but it really is about academics, and from what I can see from the various departments, we really are excelling.
Bill, what has kept you connected and so loyal to Oklahoma State University through the years? You put so much passion and energy and time and resources over the years, 30 plus years. Where does that come from?
It's the people. There's no doubt. I can go up here into the stands, and I'll be sitting next to some old guy in overall. Okay, I love that. And then next to him's a guy, that's just decked out, and we're all getting along. We're all just, you wouldn't know any difference whatsoever. Everybody's just one. Now, coming from Norman, I can tell you it's not like that. Coming up here, what was amazing when I was here was you literally, not maybe even a name, but literally knew every face. And I was amazed by that you literally knew almost all 20,000 of the kids up here. You'd see somebody, oh yeah, I've seen that, I know that person. I know. And that was just unheard of. That does not happen down south.
Bill, what, you've got a lot of your life still to live, you know. But,
I hope.
so this is not like what you want on your obituary, you know. But at this point,
I do want Pistol Pete on my tombstone.
Right. Yeah. But you know, how do you hope people remember Bill Dragoo? What do you want to remember about you?
You know, just that I was a fair guy, you know, and that you know, and that I treated everybody equal, and I was always fair with everybody, and saw the best in almost everyone. You know, I could always find those qualities. There would always be somebody to be naysaying someone, and I'd always find, well, yeah, but he's, you know, this or that, and you know, just someone who just, you know, put some positive spin on the world. You know, and that's why I like so much about this diabetes program. This has a major impact on the lives of people. It truly, truly will save lives, and is saving lives. You know, and is improving the quality of people's lives, and that means a lot to me. That is what motivates me.
Bill, back just for a couple of questions about the Alumni Association. What is, in your mind, is you've been on, you know, the executive team, you know, committee chair, on the board. What is the role, the value? What is it that Alumni Association? Why is it so important to a university to have a strong Alumni Association?
I mean, I keep going back to OU. You see a place there that has very little alumni organization, and so everything rests around football. You know, that's pretty shallow. Here, everything rests around people, and that's why the Alumni Association has always drawn me. It's about the university. It's about the camaraderie, the spirit. You know, it truly is connections. I mean, everybody's connected here. And that's why the Alumni Association is so important, because, you know, there's so many of the time that people get out of different universities. I got friends from other universities in Texas, and with the exception of, you know, Texas A&M, they don't have that same connection. It's all rests around sports. At Oklahoma State, it doesn't rest around sports. Sure, we like sports, and we want to have great teams, but there's more to it when you come up here. And that's why the Alumni Association has been so important to OSU, is because the people here have a different mentality. They want to be a part of something, the big picture. They don't want to just be a sports community. And football team, well, you know, over the years, you couldn't have really been a sports enthusiast. And that's what I always loved about OSU. Everybody still showed up, you know, and that tells you a lot right there.
You know what, if you're looking at during your era, gosh, that's probably 20 years you've been active in the Alumni Association, what have been some of the key programs, some of the key issues that they've had? You mentioned funding, and is one issue that's been problematic over the years. What other issues has the association grappled with that you remember? And I mean, I don't think positive as well as challenges.
Yeah, I was trying to think what we have grappled with.
You're talking about chapter relations and building chapters.
You know, it really, you know, what we grappled with was getting support all the time. I have to keep going back to that. You know, it just seemed like we didn't get the support that we needed. And when it seemed to, in my mind, that was the focal point of the university, would be the Alumni Association, you know, and that we didn't get that support. And still don't to this day. From sometimes we're just kind of seen as this entity that sits over here and hope that we do well. And I think that I'm hoping that Burns sees maybe differently about that, and I try to get in his ear about it, you know, as much as possible. But I can't imagine that we're not seen as the pivotal organization of the university. You know, I can't imagine why we're not, because everything stems from alumni relations. You know, I mean, you can be foundation, you can be what engineering department, whatever, and that connects some people, you know, but they still need to be connected to the overall picture. And I just have to go back to that let's get more support for the Alumni Association. Let's really look at what it really does instead of just taking it for granted.
You're reconnected again in terms of leadership role in the Alumni Association. Where do you, if you could fast forward 10 years down the road or 20 years down the road, what kind of Alumni Association would you like to see?
I'd like to see a self-funding, self-supporting Alumni Association that doesn't have to worry about a budget, you know, that has very active involvement from the alumni out there, you know, and have more programs like that actually get funding to that organization so that we can outreach even more and be able to afford to outreach into, you know, into the world where our alums are and beyond, you know, because it's as much about high school relations as well, about recruiting students, you know, who will eventually become alumni. We're always, the Alumni Association is always underestimated as to what its value is to the whole picture. I mean, it starts out, we're out there in that community when these kids are in junior high, starting to bring them in throughout the whole process. I know Jerry Gill started the program of student alum, you know, the student alumni program. So while they're here, they're involved. When they leave, they're involved. How much more important could an organization be to an institution?
Legacy program.
Yeah, legacy program, exactly. And I mean, you know, we have Connections for Life, the higher OSU grads now, the Orange Door program, you know, which is, you know, if you have a business out in anywhere in the United States, you know, you can go into that, and if you're in LA, find out who's got a restaurant or a, you know, bicycle shop or whatever, you know, and you can deal with an OSU grad. I mean, that's big time stuff. That's connections. You know, there was Jerry Gill and Larry Schill coming up with some pretty remarkable ideas that were outside the box. And I'm kind of an outside the box guy, so I appreciate that.
Bill, do you feel comfortable kind of talking about? I know you've you're some business ventures you've talked about here recently. Your diabetes, working with local physicians and clinics, and you stepped up and have dedicated some of those resources to supporting the Alumni Association.
Right.
Do you feel comfortable talking about that?
Sure. Yeah, that's not a problem. One thing I had became very aware of was that the Alumni Association has done as much for me, much more for me than I've done for them. I mean, not only have they introduced me to an awful lot of people in my local, when I was in Houston and now in Dallas, to those connections, which have been financially to my benefit. You know, I've kind of got lost there. What were we talking there?
Contribution back to the Alumni Association.
But what I decided to do was I began to see that we didn't have a lot of resources to do certain things, and there were other bureaucracies within the university that seemed to have those resources, and they were able to connect better to our alumni than we were. And in talking to the current president of the Alumni Association, saw they were underfunded dramatically, and there were so many programs we couldn't do that would be so beneficial because of lack of funds. One of the things I noticed was that even the medical school had a suite in the stadium. And we had 4 50-yard line tickets and some box seats, the Alumni Association did. And the foundation had 2 suites, for goodness sakes, you know. And I got a little bit aggravated about it. And I asked Larry Schill, I said, why don't we have a suite? Well, we don't have the money for a suite. So last year, I just went and got us a suite. And this year, I renewed it again, and it says OSU Alumni Association right on that door. And that gives the Alumni Association now the ability to bring people up to the games that they'd like to connect with and stay connected with, to bring our distinguished alums up, you know, into the suites and you know, and give them the respect that they deserve, you know, and it was a little embarrassing to say the least, to be sitting out in the stands, you know, and say, well, we've got some and they were good tickets, don't get me wrong, but it just aggravated me. So what I do now is with these DiCare diabetes centers, we give a percentage of our profits back directly to the Alumni Association. And we were also probably to the medical school for some research. So that's what we done. And in coming up with that program, that inspired people like Robert Walker and some others to do the same thing with their companies. And so, it was kind of something that just kind of took off. And we've been having meetings lately about that, about getting alumni that are involved in their own companies to give a portion of that back, which, because it's a great idea, you can give the donation to the Alumni Association for your company and satisfy your tax burden.
Bill, what have we not covered? Is anything in terms of the university, your relationship with the Alumni Association that you'd like to talk about or lift up that we haven't talked about?
No, I think we've pretty much covered it, Jerry.
Well,
I just want everyone to get involved in the Alumni Association and see how much fun it really is. Give it a shot. I went over. Now this is a good story. Found out that about half of the athletic department was not members of the Alumni Association. So I made Larry give me a whole pack, and I physically walked over there and made them sign up. Larry Reese, Matt Grantham, all these guys, made them, while I was standing there, sign up and join the Alumni Association. So that's the involvement we have to get. I just get aggravated that our own people won't even join, And so I've had this, I'm on this mission.
Bill, you've been a great ambassador for Oklahoma State University and for the Alumni Association.
Well, that's a great school.
On behalf of all the alumni, thank you for all that you've done.
Sure. Well, thank OSU, because I would not be sitting here today had I not attended this school. All right.